everyone, this is Amy Johnson Crow, and welcome to this week's Archives.com live stream. This week's topic, Salute Their Service, Identifying Military Ancestors. With May being the month that we have a lot of remembrance for the military in our family, with Memorial Day at the end of the month, we thought that this would be a good time to take a look at military research and how to really tap into those records, and so you can go ahead and salute the military members of your family tree. And military records are wonderful genealogical resources. There is so much information that is contained in them. There's often birth information, death information, information about spouses and children and parents, a lot of biographical information, as well as context, so that you can get an idea of what life was like for them while they were in the military. So they are great records, and we as genealogists and family historians really need to be tapping into the various types of military records that are out there, whether they are service records or pension records or anything related to the military. We really need to take a look at them so that we can get a more complete picture of our ancestors. But before we can get into these records that are specific to the military, we need to take a step back. We need to first identify those people who actually served in the military. So before you start searching in some military records, before you start looking for pension records and things like that, take a step back and look at other records that perhaps you've already looked at, or we're also going to take a new look at some records that can really give you some clues about possible military service. Because again, it's important to remember that not all males in the United States have served in the military. So we really want to focus our efforts on those who we have some reason to believe served. This will really help focus our military research. It will save us a lot of time later on if we take just a few minutes now and look for those clues that can help guide that research later. The first thing you want to do is to take a look at ages. And a good rule of thumb is to consider males aged 16 to 45 for military service. Now, certainly there are young men who lied about their age. Maybe they were a big 14-year-old and they could lie to get in. And certainly there are men who are older than 45 who have served in the military. But a good general rule of thumb is to take a look at those military conflicts and put that timeline of that conflict against the timeline for men who at the time would have been aged 16 to 45. So for example, the American Civil War went from 1861 to 1865. So this means that I want to take a look in my family tree for men who were born between 1816 and 1849. They are the most likely to have served in the Civil War. Now again, there are always going to be those exceptions to the rule, but this is the rule of thumb that we're going to work with when we're first trying to identify whether or not a particular individual served. So if I have a man in my family tree who was born in 1800, chances are he did not serve in the American Civil War. We also need to think about more than just the popular wars, those being the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and World War II. We need to think about all of the conflicts that were going on in our country's history. And those would include the various Indian wars, the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the Spanish-American War, the Boxer Rebellion, and World War I. So, and there are even more conflicts than that, but this is just to get you thinking about other conflicts besides the Revolution, the Civil War, and World War II. Some great resources came out of, you know, for service from these other conflicts. So we need to take them into account again when we're comparing a timeline against that 16 to 45 year age range for our male ancestors. And I do say male ancestors because although in our nation's history there have been some women who have served, and I'm talking about prior to World War II, there were women who served. By far the majority of those who served in the military were men. Now, want to take a look at some good sources for military clues. These are the types of things you want to look at to see if it will tell you whether or not, or give you some indication about military service. And these include home sources, obituaries, tombstones, and even some census records. And we'll take a look at all of these individually. First, the home sources. And what I mean by this is literally that, those things that you might already have at home that could give you clues about military service. The obvious one being photographs. This happens to be a photograph of my great uncle Arthur. And as you can see from this photograph, he's a young man, he's in an army uniform carrying a rifle, and the caption of the photo is Sicily 1943 Arthur Young. So I'm definitely taking this as a clue that my great uncle Arthur served in World War II. And in fact, when I did a little bit more research, otherwise known as asking my dad, he confirmed that yes, his uncle Arthur did serve in World War II. And I have gone on and found other records about his World War II service. But this was really the first indication I had because Uncle Arthur never talked about his service, and I never thought to ask my dad until I saw this picture. And of course, any picture that you have of a man in uniform should give you, some indication that you need to be following up with the possibility of military service. Here is a Civil War soldier. But it's not just photographs that we should be thinking about when we're looking for those sources at home. Do you have any medals? This is a reunion medal that was given out at an encampment of the GAR, which was the Grand Army of the Republic. It was an organization of honorably discharged Union veterans. So it's a Civil War veterans group. So if you have a medal like this that would have been passed out by the GAR at one of their reunions, definitely take that as a sign that there is some Civil War service in the family tree. And in the case of the GAR, it's going to be specifically service to the Union. Obituaries. Consider obituaries and what clues that they can give us about a person's life, including military service. This particular obituary is from the Benton Harbor, Michigan News Palladium from October of 1929. And this obituary of Eli Helmick is telling us all about his Civil War service, including when he volunteered and what company, what regiment he served with. So some very, very good clues here in his obituary. What about tombstones? When you see that your ancestor has a government-issued tombstone such as this one, and this one is a little bit darker than you might expect. It has weathered. It's not the bright white that we think of, say, at Arlington National Cemetery, but it's still a government-issued military tombstone. And this is indicating service from the Civil War, the specific one here for Diamond Carpenter of the 47th Indiana Infantry. But even if your ancestor doesn't have a military tombstone, or I should say a government-issued tombstone, some tombstones still give good clues about military service. Now, this particular one, you have this giant statue here at the top of a Civil War soldier. So right there we have a clue that there is some military service involved. But putting that part of the tombstone aside, let's say that that statue at the top didn't exist. But if we look at the inscription on the tombstone, and again, it's listing the regiments that he served in the Civil War. And this is not uncommon to see something like this, where it will note Civil War veteran or World War I veteran, excuse me, and even possibly, as in this case, listing the exact regiments that he served in, which is a wonderful clue that we can use to follow up with further resources. What about using the census for finding clues to military service? One census that can give us such information is the 1910 census. And as you can see, this is the very top of the census page. And we tend to stay over here on the left where all of the names and the relationships are listed. But if you read all of the questions, you'll find a question over here on the right, all the way over here in column 30. And the question was whether a survivor of the Union or Confederate Army or Navy. So again, we tend to concentrate over here on the left, but read the 1910 census all the way over to the right-hand side of the page and pay particular attention to this column 30, where it's asking specifically about Civil War service. And as an example, here we have John Radcliffe. This is in the 1910 census. We see that he's age 76, and oftentimes we would stop just about this part of the census. We might scroll over a little bit and look at his place of birth and his father and mother's place of birth. But if we keep going all the way over to that right-hand side of the page, we see noted in column 30 the notation UA, or Union Army. So that's our clue that John Radcliffe did serve in the Union Army during the Civil War, and we should follow up on that to see what other records we can find. Again, this is in the 1910 census. A lot of you are probably familiar with the 1940 census. And again, it's another one of those censuses that is very, very wide. But we tend to focus over here on the left where we have the names and the relationships and the ages and that all that good stuff. But not only is there this information here, two people on each page were also supposed to answer supplemental questions down at the very bottom of the page. And that's what I have noted down here, is this supplemental section. And it's pretty easy to overlook. But one of the questions in that supplemental section is a section about veterans. And specifically, is this person a veteran of the United States military forces? Or is this person the wife, widow, or under 18-year-old child of a veteran? So we can pick up information based on if that person was a veteran or if that person is the wife, widow, or minor child of a veteran. So again, not everyone answered this question. It only pertained to two people on each page. But if we take a look at this example, here we have Howard W. Brent, and he lived in Washington, D.C. When you're looking at the census, in the 1940 census, pay attention to this section over here. It's actually part of the form. And there are two lines on each page that will indicate that that person was supposed to answer supplemental questions. And if one of your ancestors or one of the people in your ancestors' household falls on this line, take a look at the bottom of the page, down in that bottom section where they're asking the supplementary questions. And here we have Howard Brent, who is answering the questions, and he indicates that yes, he is a veteran. And there's also a section where they would indicate a code, and it would actually tell what type of service they provided, whether they were in the First World War, whether they were a veteran of the Spanish-American War, whether they were a member of the regular Army or regular Navy, as well as a place to indicate that it was other service other than what their specific codes were for. And all of that information is listed at the very bottom of the page. You will find all of those codes right there. But here's the section that we want to concentrate on in order to find information about that person's military status in the 1940 census. So if you're interested in looking at military records on archives.com, after you log in, click at the very top of the page, click on the Search tab, and that will open up more search options for you. It'll open up a page like this, and what you can do is actually select the record type that you want to look for. So I can go and use this drop down and select that I want to look just at military records. If I want to be even more specific than that, I can actually go in and select a specific military collection that I want to search, or I can just search all military records. We have numerous military collections on archives.com. Some of the major ones include World War I draft cards, the American Battle Monuments Commission burial records, and these are wonderful records of armed force members who are buried in the American cemeteries in foreign countries. World War II U.S. Army enlistment records, and a wonderful database called Patriots of Color, which is a Revolutionary War database of men and women who provided patriot service. These men and women of color who provided patriot service to the American cause during the Revolutionary War. So whether they actually served in the whether or not they served as part of the colonial efforts actually in the army or in militias, or whether they provided service such as feeding the troops or providing other assistance like that. So that's a great database for Revolutionary War materials. Again, Patriots of Color. Next week on the archives.com live stream, make sure to read all about it using newspapers. Newspapers are a great resource for genealogy and family history, being able to read what our ancestors were reading and see what they were doing, and sometimes even finding photographs. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. That's next Wednesday, the 15th of May at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Until then, make sure that you stay connected with archives.com, whether it's on the blog, liking us on Facebook, following us on Twitter, or you can go back and look at our past live streams because all of them have been archived and uploaded to our YouTube channel. So make sure to take a look over there at some topics that we've done in the past. For those of you who are at the NGS conference, that's the National Genealogical Society conference going on right now in Las Vegas, Nevada, be sure to stop by and say hi to us in the exhibit hall. We would love to see you. And it's actually because of the NGS conference that I'm not going to be able to be in the chat room with you today, because I'm actually pre-recording this and won't be able to join you live in the chat room. But I will be back live next week when we talk about using newspapers. So Until then, this is Amy Johnson Crow wishing you happy researching.